Dave Reagon. Dave Reagon, Janet Reagon, who was president of the board for many, many years for Rex Brasher. Dave and Janet have now moved to the Bay Area. And Dave and Janet lived in Wassaic for 43 years, during which time they raised 3 boys. They were both teachers here, 40 years as teachers, 30 of which was at Weepatuk High School. So Dave's experience teaching art was 7th grade industrial arts, but he has made just a tremendous amount of progress on research of what Rex Brasher did in terms of his techniques. And we're going to share a little bit of that with you today.
Hey, hello everybody. We're sitting here in sunny California. It hasn't rained here for about 5 months. That's normal. And got a few things that I'm going to go through some of the things that Rex had to know in order to get his birds of North America and trees of North America printed. So why don't we just go to the first slide?
We're there, Dave. Hold on just a second. I want to see if I can let you see a little bit of what we see.
Yeah, I'll be blind otherwise.
Yeah, just a minute.
Okay.
Can you see that, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Let's see if I can move myself a little bit. All right, this is a actual scan of a Rex Brasher watercolor. The bird is a sharp-shinned hawk, a pair of sharp-shinned hawks, and it's basically an exact replica, as much as you can get of the watercolor painting. Watercolor painting is not on public exhibit. You can go see it in Stores, Connecticut if you want to make the trip. But this is what Rex's problem was, like all performing artists and artists of all kinds. He wanted to get his birds out to the general public. And one of the ways he could do this was, he came up with a mat. He was like everybody else. My granddaughter, Lizzie, she comes home with pictures of birds or pictures of things that she's drawn, and she wants to show it to us. And so the last time she came over, she had this picture, and I go, "Oh, that's a nice bird, Lizzie." And she goes, "Well, Grandpa, it's really an octopus." And then she kind of left the room, but you know, she gave me a steely look. A 10-year-old can give really steely looks. And she went out of the room. We got her back again with a chocolate chip cookie, and everything was fine. Rex Brasher had a bigger problem. He had 850 of these pictures he wanted to get out to basically the general public. And he had to do it at a reasonable cost and try to finish it in his lifetime. And he wasn't getting in yet. So what he decided to do was to, what he decided to do was to get copies, high grayscale copies of each of his paintings, and then he would paint them using a stencil and an airbrush. So the problem was finding somebody that could take this painting, which is full of different tones and colors. It's actually a spectacular painting. The birds in the picture, if you ever notice that birds in pictures are always looking at you, kind of discomforting. These birds hang around bird feeders, but they're not there for the bird food most of the time. So anyway, the next picture, go to the next picture. This is a grayscale. This is a grayscale replica of the last painting, of the last color painting. This is what Rex really wanted. It has a high tonal value. It goes from stark blacks to bright whites and all shades of gray in between. He needed it like this because he was going to use an airbrush and spray paint and stencils and spray paint the whole thing. So he needed to have the tonal qualities. So you got to look a little bit about what tone is. If you go to the next page, the next slide, there's some pictures that illustrate tone. A, B, and C are done using colored pencils, where at the right-hand edge of the rectangle, the pressure is very high and it eliminates any of the white background that the paper has. And as you progress to the left across all three of those, the tone gets lighter. Where it's dark red or pure red, you could assign a tone of 100 to that, and as you move over to the left, the tone would decrease to, if it got to be pure white, to 0. C is where you can change tone by using 2-color pencils. D, these are sand particles that are arranged from total blackout on the right-hand side to practically just pure white on the other side. And E is just scribbling with a pencil, changing tone and eliminating some of the white. The next picture took some department picture. I used a very soft pencil, a 6B, and then every centimeter on the drawing I lightened up with from 6B all to 6H, a very hard pencil. And I pressed really hard at the bottom. I could have eliminated all of the black or all the white, and halfway up in the middle you get gray. Problem with printing is that printer's ink is black and paper is white. So in order to get gray, you need to come up with some kind of system. Go to the next one, please. All right, your computer does this. The computer on white, or in grayscale on a computer, white is 0. And then the computer can go up 255 levels of gray. So the bottom picture to the right is 255, I think it says 255 different levels. And that's about it. If you stretch this out over a big enough picture, you can start to see it break up. But most of the time, this is what you're seeing. So Brasher wanted to get, turn to the next page, please. This is a black and white photograph which has a big range in tonality, which is true of most black and white photographs. This one was taken in 1872 by a guy, what was his name? Excuse me, William Henry Jackson, who was working for a survey that the national U.S. government was doing across the 40th parallel. This was taken in with a wet plate camera, with a very large camera, with no way of controlling the light, and it still shows tones of gray in the background and dark blacks in the foreground. The title of the picture is Hanging Rock. Jackson in his lifetime produced 80,000 photographs, and the most famous ones were in Yellowstone, what's now Yellowstone National Park. His photographs of the geysers and hot springs in Yellowstone, along with some paintings that Thomas Moran did of the Yellowstone Falls, helped convince Congress to set aside that area as Yellowstone National Park. So most black and I show a very large range of tonality. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, one of the ways of the next few paintings, the next few pictures show different ways of reproducing art. One of the ways was by stenciling. So normally you would take something like a leaf and glue it to a piece of paper, or outline it on a piece of paper, and then cut it out, and then spray paint it, and you could produce a picture of the leaf. And you could continue to do this until you had hundreds of pictures of the leaf if you wanted. What Rex was going to do was use stenciling to color his birds, and he hadn't really worked out the details yet. This stencil, the stencil is actually a spider web, and the paint is actually glue and against a black background. The spider escaped a bit, so no spiders were harmed in this thing. The next picture. Another way to produce art back to 1400, and before movable type. When Gutenberg came along with movable type, printers were eventually able to incorporate woodcuts into the printing process. So newspapers and books could be illustrated and people could buy them. One of the most popular use of woodcuts or wood engravings was in dime novels. Because there was one way of reaching, millions of people could afford to buy a dime novel, and the covers were always illustrated up till about 1900 with these wood engravings. The picture on the left is shows John Wesley Powell on his first voyage down the Grand Canyon. John Wesley Powell had one arm, but he used to go climbing cliffs, and he often got in trouble. In this particular case, if you look carefully, the lower part of the picture, the river is down below. He's several hundred feet above the river, and he's hanging on with his one hand. And his partner, who was supposed to keep track of him, climbed above him and took off his pants and lowered the pants down and rescued him. John Wesley Powell was one of the most influential Americans of the 1900s, from 1850 on, and still is in some respects. The right-hand picture is Through the Looking Glass by Carroll. This is a wood engraving also. It's been colored. The artist who did the engraving, painting, it was very influential in the book. Okay. So this is a form of raised relief printing, where the ink is applied, the artist carves away part of the picture and leaves the part that he wants in high relief. Ink can get applied and then put on. The next picture shows Intaglio wearing what the artist does is take a piece of copper, a flat sheet of copper, and engrave the copper with a special tool. He cuts away the copper until he has a picture, or he can shade, or he can do various things to the copper plate. Ink is then applied to the complete plate and that's wiped off, and then paper is rolled under high pressure across the plate, and the ink that's in the incised part is transferred to the paper. So this is one example of engraving. It's very similar to what was going on with the woodcut. The next picture, this is by Nathan Hale, who lives in Armenia. It's probably a lithograph, I'm not sure, but it has all the attributes of a lithograph. Lithographs are made on stone, a flat piece of limestone. Around 1780 or 90, someone discovered that if you wrote on this limestone with a piece of greasy crayon and then you got it wet, you could print the ink, the part that you, okay, let's start over. You roll ink across the drawing. The part in crayon would attract the ink and the water would repel it. And then under fairly high pressure, again, you would roll a piece, you put a piece of paper on and then roll a rolling press across it and come up with today and lots of different applications. Go to the next picture, please. Photo offset lithography is the most common use of way of printing things today. It's very accurate, it's very cheap, and the colors it's actually the epitome of color printing today at large scale. National Geographic uses this method. If you look at their pictures with a 10-power magnifying glass, you can actually see little dots that make up the picture. The next picture, please. These are some examples of the ones on the left and the right are color lithography. One of them is a cartoon, the other one is a picture from the National Geographic, I guess, and if you magnify them or look at them closely, they're all different colored dots. The dots in both of the color pictures are multiple dots when you look at them closely, and they're set up by computers. The other picture, the black and white, shows a picture, a print made by you take a screen and put it between the drawing that you're trying to duplicate, and then the screen has the effect of breaking the drawing or the picture up into small dots, and those dots can be transferred to basically a photographic plate, and you can print it. Okay, the next picture. All right, this is the kind of the meat of the thing. What I was trying to show here with this discussion is that I'm trying to determine what Rex Brasher actually settled on to print his black and white, to produce his black and white prints. And this is a Western grebe. This is the black and white picture that he received from Meriden Gravure, a company in Meriden, Connecticut, that for years was able to use a special process called polytype to produce very high-toned prints. They specialized in copying artworks and also copying scientific illustration. So my theory was, my hypothesis was that these Brasher prints, these black and whites, are actually collotypes. Janet and I ended up with about 25 or 30 of these. When she was president of the RVA, this sent us a big load of these. There used to be hundreds of thousands of them, but most of them are lost. So I was able to study, using a microscope, the structure of the pictures. So if you go to the next one, this is a close-up. You can't see anything that makes up you can see the very subtle shading of the white bird, and you can actually see different layers of gray in the black top on the bird, the black head on the bird. The next picture is a close-up of the bird's, not this bird, but the bird in the upper part of the picture, the bird's eye. And you start to see a pattern there. In the white of the eye, you see what is described as a reticulated pattern. And as you move towards the center of the eye, the pattern gets darker. And in the pupil of the eye, it becomes totally dark. The white, so-called light spot on the eye is totally white. There's nothing going on here. So this is a hallmark of a collotype. The printing process for collotypes is so difficult to describe. And even though I've read about 10 different renditions of it, I still don't understand it. The upshot was that, or make it quick, if you take a chemical called potassium dichromate, which the dichromates are sensitive to ultraviolet light. So they will turn from bright orange, which they are, right, in their normal state, to sort of a brown when exposed to light. So what the people who invented the collotype, however they did it, they mixed the potassium dichromate with melted gelatin. And it's not a good idea to try at home because potassium dichromate, for one thing, is poisonous. It's a carcinogen, and it also catches fire. If it doesn't catch fire, it'll help other things burn. But nonetheless, this was widely used. So then the mixture was poured onto a glass plate and carefully leveled. The glass plate was usually 2 feet by 4 feet and maybe 3/8 of an inch thick, and it was very heavy. So it had to be precisely leveled, and the excess was poured off. After about 8 hours in a controlled temperature room, about 52 degrees, the gelatin had solidified, and then when it was cooled down to a certain point, it would reticulate, that is, break up into little tiny rectangles or little tiny polygons, basically. And when it was exposed to light, the greater the light exposure, the darker the potassium dichromate became. And you ended up with something like, you ended up with a photographic plate. The photographic plate was then moistened with a glycerin and water mixture that would swell up some of the potassium, swell up some of the gel, depending on how much light it absorbed. And then, it could be washed off. What was left when you washed it off was a photographic plate that had very high grayscale values, and this was called a collotype. By 1960, very few people were using a collotype. The process was very uneven. You could never predict what you were going to get. About half the time, after many hours of work, nothing turned out. But Merritt and Gorvier had been doing this for years, and they had 3 presses and 3 people who, for years, had been doing it and had basically a magic formula for success. Okay, the next page, please. Next page, please. All right, this is a colored print, Brasher print. It's a gray crown. A gray crown rosy finch. It's been painted. It's from a book that somebody broke up and then sold the individual plates. I think they want something like $55 for this one. You're talking about if you have 800 or 900 plates, there's a possibility of making some money. If you look at it closely, as in the next picture, there's the wing, and you start to see a little, well, first of all, the red is obviously paint. It's watercolor, and it's been sprayed on with an airbrush. And the particles, the paint particles are very small paint droplets when they come out of the brush, if the brush is properly adjusted. So we oversprayed some of the dark part of the wing that was red, and kept the black tone underneath. And down below the red, you can see some of the brown on the bird. And then you left the natural black and the natural white, and did some very little overspraying with the brown in the top. One more picture. Are we out of pictures or what? There we go. Okay. This is taken with a 20 power or 30 power microscope. That you need about 30x power to magnify the collotype pattern. But this is very good evidence that the print is actually a collotype like the previous one. You can see the white area has got a little bit of red overspray on it, but mostly you can only barely see the reticulated pattern. Okay, next picture. These are peregrine falcons. It's a spectacular black and white picture. The color picture is mostly dark colors. So let's go to the next picture, a close-up of the head of the peregrine. You can't really see, you can see a lot of details on the feathers that you wouldn't be able to see if you were farther away. If you look closer at the little right-hand picture, you can see some of the reticulation. The dark black consists of a web of connected polygons. And the white also shows the same thing. This is the claw of one of the other peregrine, and you can see how good the contrast is, and how small the point, how accurate the rendition is. The claw of the bird is one sharp point on the print. The picture is about 6 millimeters. The field of view in the microscope is about 6 millimeters. I used a cell phone camera through the microscope eyepiece to capture these pictures. It took me for every 10 pictures I took, I got about one good one. I eventually got a better camera and a better phone and was able to be a little bit more successful with it. But I had talking to myself for quite a while. Okay, next picture. I don't know how well you can see this one. This is from the lightest part of the peregrine photo, and you can see the reticulation there as well. It's very, very light, but it's still there. At the top of that photo, you can see a darker area, and the cells are filled in with a little bit more black than on the other part. Okay, next picture. There's a picture of the eye of the peregrine. It's the same kind of pattern. The white of the eye has very little reticulation, and as you get closer to the pupil, it gets darker and darker. The left-hand picture is a pattern, part of the wing pattern, where the dark colors and the light colors are shown very clearly. And everything you see here, particularly times described as a worm-like texture that identifies a collotype. Okay, next picture. There's some more. I had, like I said, 25 of these pictures. So I could only, with a microscope, get to the edge of the picture, given the size of the microscope. But I had a 30-power hand magnifier, and I was able to investigate all 25 of them in different places on the prints. But these are taken from the edge of the print, and they all show the typical signature of a collotype: the reticulated pattern, the worm-like structure. All of the pictures that I examined, the black and whites anyway, have this pattern. Okay, next picture. Some more of the same. Some of them have been partly colored with overspray or with the airbrush, but most of them are just plain black and white. Okay. Next picture. You kind of get the idea that I'm trying to influence your opinion that all of these are made with the collotype procedure. This picture is taken from a book that was published about Meriden Press about 10 years ago, and they spend a good deal of time talking about collotypes and this is a picture of a collotype. So if you compare it with the previous pictures, this one actually identifies a collotype. I think it's fairly good evidence that so far everything you've seen is a collotype, and so far everything that Rex did with those pictures anyway was a collotype, and he was very satisfied with the results. He was a hard guy to satisfy, because if you remember anything about him, he burned 2 complete sets of his paintings because he wasn't satisfied with them, and he started completely over. He burned them because he wanted no evidence of what he did before. And he was very satisfied with what he got from Meriden. Okay, next picture. This is from the Atlas of Comparative Photography. I think it's by Getty, and it has different, if you can see them, it has different pictures. The collotype is on there. I don't know which one it is. I can't tell from here, but it definitely, it's the second one down, or the top one is actually a collotype, and this is a comparative analysis of, you know, if you see it here and you go back and compare it with what you've just seen, it's pretty much also corroborating evidence that the pictures were done with a collotype. Okay, next picture, please. All right, this is Mountain Chickadee. This is a painted picture. It was a gift to Janet and I from Melody, and we had it on the wall for quite a few years, and so when I was doing this study, I took it down and took it out of the frame, and I unglassed it and everything, and then started to look at it with a microscope and also with a magnifier. It's fully painted. It doesn't have much of a background. The background's a very light blue. Okay, go to the next picture. Look at this one closely. You can see that this is a leaf, part of the leaf. It's 30 power. You can see a net-like structure here. Actually, it looks like a screen. These are not collotypes. And it turns out that well, go to the next picture, please. Here's Rex's signature. Again, it looks the same way. It's made up of little square dots, a square dot pattern. That's not a collotype pattern. Next picture. This is another picture of a leaf. It's been lightly colored, but the collotype pattern is not there. Instead, it's like looking through a window screen. So it probably wasn't done by Meriden. It might have been done by the first printer that Rex hired. And to get evidence on that, I found the site, to find it here, to read it. And Amherst College has something called the Sofer Ornithology Collection. And Dr. Sofer collected a huge number of bird prints and originals. And he donated the collection to Amherst. Set of Birds and Trees of America. And he looked at every single one of them and did a little short synopsis. And the first one, he noted right away that, I'll read it, the reviewer notes that volumes 11 and 12 were the first ones colored and sent to subscribers. It's not clear why halftone, which creates tonality by photographing the original through a fine screen, was used instead of collotype. According to Rex's biography, it was decided to send out the 12th volume first to subscribers because the birds in that volume were some of the most attractive species and would boost future sales. So when he examined volume 11, he found the same thing. So, and all the rest of the volumes were done in collotypes, and he basically left it at that. So the mystery is maybe that, and if you read the biography kind of brushes over it, but it seems like Rex had employed a company in New York City, probably called the Rudge Company, which is a very popular and well-known company, to do the black and whites. And they did them in halftone, which is breaking up the painting into using a screen. And Rex didn't like the idea because if you look at them closely without even a magnifying glass, it's possible to see the dot pattern. So it could be after volumes 12 and 11 were finally finished and then sent off to the subscribers that each changed over to Meriden, but there's no real evidence of that yet. It's very interesting because I looked at this and I know this is not a collotype. And my whole idea that they were all done with collotypes was, a little dented. So go to the next picture, please. All right, this is a rectangle. It resembles a Baltimore Oriole. If you go to any of the books, though, the Orioles in the books they look similar, but they're not the same bird. But this is the one that Janet's parents had a lot of Rex's material, and this was one they had in the house, so we ended up with it. When you examine it closely, go ahead, the next picture. Examine it closely, you don't see any dot pattern, you don't see any pattern at all. You just see the brush strokes, the watercolor strokes. You can see how he built up the colors using multiple strokes. And if you look at it really closely, you can actually see pencil lines on the light colored feathers. So this might have been a working sketch. Since it's not done on regular watercolor paper, it's done on something called, like I said, illustration board, which is a very thin material, but quite different from paper. So it's kind of a mystery what it was in the first place. It is signed by Rex. It's not dated. So I think the background is typical of what he was doing, apple blossoms. But it's kind of a mystery where it came from. Go to the next picture, please. These are two Roadrunners. The top one is from 1910, I think. And the bottom one is from 1940. It's dated 1942, maybe? 1940s, the 1940s. The top one is a painted collotype. If you see this one in person or even in large print like this one, it's a spectacular bird. He's got it completely off the ground. You notice the shadow underneath. The background is fully painted in with another Roadrunner was sticking up in the air, which is typical. And one detail he got, the scientific name of a Roadrunner. Back of their foot, and they point backwards. So when the bird is running, that's what you can see clearly. So Rex was able to see that. These are birds that run really fast and they don't sit still. So he had to do a lot of research, a lot of sketching, and he in his biography, he spends a lot of time talking about roadrunners. It was so interesting. The bottom picture was, this is actually a scan. We have, the RVA had this picture taken out of the frame and set it off and had it scanned at very high resolution, and it's done done as a print. It's probably a dot matrix print or an inkjet print. When you look at it with a microscope, you don't see any pattern at all, because the dots that the inkjet printer make are very, very, very tiny. They produced maybe a half a dozen of these. They were for sale.
They were from a picture. They were from a picture that hung in Debbie's house.
Yeah, this was hanging in the house. So we had a copy with the blessing of Yukon. Yukon actually owns all the prints. Maybe you heard that.
Paintings.
The paintings, I'm sorry. They're all kept in cold storage. If you want to go see them, you make a reservation and you tell them which ones you want and they'll bring them out. They're quite spectacular. But some of the ones that were done, like the Roadrunner above, they're unbelievably good. Notice that the two birds they're not the same color. The top one is mostly black and white, and the bottom one is kind of brown. And the background isn't nearly as nice as it is at the top one. So the next picture. This is the collotype. This is a Meriden press, and this is the collotype press. It's a huge thing. Yeah. By 1967, two of them had died, and with the advent of much better techniques that were far surer, all the presses were scrapped. The rooms were taken over for something else. But the collotype process is only used by a few artists nationwide. You can go online and watch a YouTube video on how to make your own collotype, but be aware that none of the guys seem to be using a mask, and the stuff really is poisonous, and more ways than one. So I don't know if there's any residue on any of the prints, but I doubt it. So that's about all I got to say today. I'm in kind of a hurry to get through it, but maybe we're on time. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, guys.